In Edo, Japan, a wife confessed through tears that her 66-year-old husband came for her up to 10 times in a single day, and that her body could no longer endure it. From that moment on, loneliness, desire, and guilt pushed another woman toward a tragedy she could never truly escape. I can't take it anymore. My husband is 66, but his desire is still like a young man's. When Haruna Suzuki heard that confession from Madame Aiko, something old and long asleep stirred inside her. It wasn't a clear thought or an instant decision. It was a slow, dangerous feeling, as if a door that had been shut for 8 years had begun to open without making a sound. Haruna was 61. She was no longer a girl who mistook emotion for destiny or desire for love. She had known marriage, loss, poverty, and a loneliness so deep that over time she had learned to live with it like another shadow attached to her body. After becoming a widow, she grew used to living without asking for much, serving without drawing attention, and hiding her own longings beneath layers of obedience, work, and silence. And yet, that afternoon, in a quiet house in old Edo, one shameful sentence changed the course of her life. For 2 nights and 3 days, Haruna would cross a line she never should have crossed. She would feel again the tremor of being seen as a woman, taste a brief and forbidden happiness, and then carry a guilt that not even the passing of months could fully erase. Because in the end, she learned something painful. Even in old age, the heart can still burn. Yet, not every fire should be fed. Before we begin, if you enjoy deep stories from old Edo, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and stay until the end. This is an intimate, bitter confession about loneliness, desire, guilt, and the price of feeling alive again when you believed all desire belonged to the past. 8 years had passed since Hiroshi, Haruna's husband, died. On that rainy day, when the cart bringing him home overturned on a muddy road, her life split apart forever. Until then, she had been a simple woman, the wife of a hard-working man, not wealthy, but with a home to return to and a voice that spoke her name when night fell. After Hiroshi's death, that small world disappeared. They had no children, and there was no family willing to take her in with genuine affection. For months, Haruna drifted from house to house, accepting any honest work that would keep her alive. She washed clothes, tended the sick, cooked in other people's homes, and slept in cold rooms where dampness seeped through paper walls. Little by little, the woman who had once been a wife blurred and faded, until she became a widow with a calm face, strong hands, and tired eyes. That was when she arrived at the Yamamoto residence. Mr. Yamamoto owned a respected merchant house in Edo. He sold fine fabrics, managed loans, and kept dealings with traders across different districts. In the city, people said he was severe but fair, someone who could spot a lie with a single look into your eyes. When Haruna came to ask for work as a maid, he was 58, though his straight back, firm shoulders, and the confidence in his voice made him seem younger. Haruna remembered that interview clearly. Mr. Yamamoto did not treat her like just any servant. He invited her to sit at the edge of the tatami, asked about her health, her experience, and her husband's death. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he said, serious, but not cold. Mrs. Suzuki, my home should not be only a place where you come to work. If you choose to stay with us, I want you to feel at ease. We value those who help us. You will not be a stranger here. The words were simple, but to a woman who had lost almost everything, they meant more than he could have imagined. Haruna accepted the position, and for the next 8 years, she made that household's routine the center of her existence. Every morning she arrived before the 7th hour, lit the fire, washed the rice, and prepared the miso soup Mr. Yamamoto liked so much. For Madame Aiko, she made lighter dishes because Aiko preferred gentle flavors and delicate meals. Then Haruna washed bowls, swept corridors, beat dust from tatami mats, folded clothes, went to the market, and returned with fresh vegetables, fish or tofu for dinner. From the outside, her life might have looked repetitive, but to Haruna, that repetition was a kind of peace. Madame Aiko, Mr. Yamamoto's wife, had been a dancer in her youth. Though she was now past 60, she carried an elegance that was hard to ignore. She walked with her back straight, her fingers held neatly together, her neck slightly inclined, as if she still heard a secret music guiding every movement. Sometimes, watching her prepare tea, Haruna thought that Aiko had grown old without losing all of her glow. Mr. Yamamoto treated Haruna with consideration as well. During festivals, he gave her small rewards. And when Aiko fell ill one winter, Haruna and Aiko spent an entire night beside her futon, changing cool cloths and preparing hot infusions. They were not blood family, but between the three of them, a quiet trust had formed. The kind built over years of habit and small gestures. That was why Haruna believed nothing would ever change. But over the last 6 months, she began to notice strange details. Madame Aiko would rise some mornings with a pained expression. One hand braced at her waist before she could stand. Other times she walked slowly, as if a bad night had left her body sore. Mr. Yamamoto, meanwhile, spent more and more time alone in his study. At dusk, he would drink sake, seated before his account books, eyes lost in the lamplight. Haruna would see him from behind as she washed dishes and think that even though he lived with others, he seemed profoundly alone. She also noticed something more delicate. The couple's futons were no longer laid out in the same room. At first, she thought it was temporary. Perhaps Aiko had trouble sleeping, or Mr. Yamamoto worked too late. But weeks passed, and the separation remained. Haruna prepared one room for him and another for her, while no one in the house spoke a word about it. In Edo, important things were rarely said outright. They were hidden behind sliding doors, behind teacups, behind measured smiles. In that mansion, silence began to weigh more than any noise. One May afternoon, after dinner, Haruna was in the kitchen cleaning utensils, when Madame Aiko entered holding a small cup of sake. That alone was unusual, because Aiko almost never drank. Even stranger was how her fingers trembled. "Haruna," Aiko said quietly, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Haruna set down the cloth, wiped her hands on her apron, and answered with respect. "Of course, ma'am." They went into the small sitting room. The house was so quiet they could hear the slow drip of the water clock, and far away, the muted hum of the street. Aiko sat down but didn't speak at once. She stared at the cup in her hands for a long time, as if gathering courage to say something she had held inside for too long. "What I'm about to tell you," she said at last, "you must not repeat. Not even to my husband. Especially not to my husband." Haruna felt a weight settle in her chest. "I won't say a word, Mom." Aiko lowered her voice even more. "There is something in my marriage that is making me suffer." Haruna first thought of money, family disputes, old resentments. But when she saw Madame Aiko's cheeks slowly reddening, she understood this was a far more intimate pain. "My husband is not a bad man," Aiko continued. "On the contrary, he is attentive, responsible, strong, too strong, perhaps." Haruna didn't understand right away. "Too strong." Aiko took a small sip of sake and closed her eyes in shame. "He is 66, Haruna, but in certain matters, he is still like a young man. His body, his desire, his energy, everything in him is too much for me. There were days when he came to me again and again until I had no strength left. 10 times in a single day, Haruna. 10. How is a woman my age supposed to endure something like that? Haruna felt her face grow hot. She didn't know where to look or what expression to wear in front of such an intimate confession. Aiko continued, her voice breaking. For many years, I fulfilled my duty as a wife without complaint. But my body is not the same now. What I could endure before now hurts. That is why I've started sleeping in a different room. Even so, there are nights I cannot avoid it, and afterward, I spend days in pain. My waist, my hips, my whole body. Haruna clenched her hands in her lap. In 8 years, she had never imagined that part of the Yamamoto marriage. The house that looked orderly and respectable from the outside hid a suffering that left no visible marks, yet was breaking Madame Aiko from within. I went to see a masseur, Aiko went on. He told me my body is weakened by age and that I must take care of myself. But how do I take care of myself if my own husband doesn't understand that his strength hurts me? How do you speak of something like this after more than 40 years of marriage? Haruna found no words. She only took Madame Aiko's hand and felt how cold it was. I can't tell my friends, Aiko whispered. They would laugh, or they would think I should be grateful to have a husband so vigorous at this age. No one understands what it feels like when your body no longer keeps up. You've been here 8 years. You're almost family. That's why I'm telling you. Haruna listened in silence. She felt compassion, yet alongside that compassion, something small, shameful, and dark appeared. Curiosity. She found herself wondering if Mr. Yamamoto truly was like that. If at 66, he still held so much strength and desire that his wife could not endure him. She hated herself for thinking it while Aiko suffered, but the thought had already been born, and some seeds, once they fall into the heart, cannot be pulled out easily. That night, when Haruna returned to her small room in the neighborhood lodging, she could not sleep. She lay on her back staring at the low ceiling, while the muted sounds of Edo filtered through thin walls. Distant footsteps, voices fading into the night, a dog barking, wood creaking. Aiko's confession spun in her head with cruel persistence. After Hiroshi died, Haruna had closed part of herself the way you close a box that hurts to open. She did not allow herself to remember the warmth of an embrace, the tremor of a touch, the thrill of being desired. She told herself that at 61, those things belonged to the past. And yet that night, she remembered her husband. The last time they slept together, a month before the accident. His warm hand, his quiet laugh, the way he looked at her, as if no one else existed. She had believed 8 years had erased everything. She was wrong. The woman inside her had not died. She had only been asleep. And Aiko's confession had awakened her. The next morning, as Haruna stepped through the gate of the Yamamoto mansion, her heart beat with an uncomfortable force. She went to the kitchen, lit the fire, and set the broth to boil. But her hands were not steady. She spilled water, mixed up seasonings, and had to correct the soup twice. From the sitting room, Mr. Yamamoto lifted his eyes from his papers. Haruna, you seem unsettled today. Are you well? Yes, sir. I walked too quickly, that's all. It was a lie. She wasn't tired. She was nervous. For the first time in 8 years, she looked at Mr. Yamamoto differently. She noticed his broad shoulders beneath the kimono, his strong hands holding the brush, the firmness of his back, and the calm of a man who had built his life on willpower. And then she remembered Aiko's words. Too strong. Haruna dropped her gaze immediately. He was her employer, the husband of the woman who trusted her, a man who had treated her with respect for years. She should not look at him that way, but the thought insisted. Over the next week, the house became a strange place. Every sound Mr. Yamamoto made seemed sharper. The soft scrape of his steps in the corridor, the turning of pages in the study, the small throat clearing before he drank tea. One morning, Haruna made the miso soup too salty, and when he tasted it, he smiled gently. "Haruna, today the miso has character." She startled. "Forgive me, sir. I must have been distracted." "You seem tired lately. Are you in pain?" "No, sir. I'm fine." But she wasn't. Her mind, which for years had been as calm as a tidy room, was filling with images she shouldn't have. One day, as she folded one of Mr. Yamamoto's kimono, she froze with the silk in her hands, imagining those shoulders beneath it. She shook her head hard, as if she could drive out what was waking inside her. Not long after, Madame Aiko sought her out again. Haruna returned from the market with a basket of vegetables and found Aiko sitting in the sitting room, paler than usual. "Haruna, come here a moment." Haruna left the basket in the kitchen and sat beside her. "Are you unwell, ma'am?" Aiko sighed. "It happened again last night." Haruna felt her heart tighten. "Your husband?" "Yes. I can't blame him entirely. He doesn't understand what it costs me. For him, perhaps it's affection. Perhaps it's his way of keeping the marriage alive. But for me, it has become a burden. This morning I had to go to the masseur again. He told me my hips are weak, that I must take care of myself. How do I take care of myself if my own husband doesn't know how to stop?" Haruna pressed her lips together. She should have comforted Aiko, but she felt again that guilty curiosity threading through her compassion. "Maybe you could talk to him, Mom," calmly. Aiko let out a sad laugh. "If I could talk about it, I would have already. In more than 40 years of marriage, we never learned to truly speak. We share a house, a family name, responsibilities, but not our wounds." The sentence hung in the room. They shared a house, but not wounds. Haruna looked at Madame Aiko with pity, yet at the same time, she couldn't help picturing Mr. Yamamoto, so dignified, so controlled behind his study door. How could that man hide so much force inside him? That evening, while serving dinner, Haruna's hand brushed Mr. Yamamoto's by accident. It was the smallest contact, barely an instant, yet she felt a shock run up her arm. "Forgive me," she murmured. "It's nothing," he replied. He kept eating as if nothing had happened, but Haruna returned to the kitchen with her chest unsettled. She washed her hands again and again in cold water, but the heat would not leave. The following Wednesday, Madame Aiko had dance practice. On those days, she usually left after breakfast and returned late in the afternoon. Before, it meant nothing to Haruna, just another routine. Now she couldn't stop thinking that for several hours, the house would be quiet with only Mr. Yamamoto and herself inside it. That morning she took longer than usual choosing her kimono. She didn't pick the most eye-catching one, that would have been too obvious. But she chose a lighter tone with a small pattern of discreet flowers she hadn't worn in years. When she saw herself in the polished metal mirror, she felt ashamed of herself. But she didn't change. At the mansion, Madame Aiko prepared to leave. "Haruna, I'll be out until late today. Look after my husband at midday. If I leave him alone, he barely eats." "Don't worry, ma'am." When the door slid shut behind Aiko, the house fell strangely silent. Mr. Yamamoto worked in his study, and Haruna prepared a more careful lunch than usual. White rice, simmered vegetables, fish, sweet omelette, and a clear soup. When she served it, he lifted his brows. Are we expecting guests today? No, sir. I only thought you should eat properly. He smiled. Then I won't eat alone. Haruna, sit with me. There's far too much for one person. She should have refused. A servant didn't sit to eat with the master, except in rare circumstances. But that day, she couldn't say no. They sat facing each other and spoke of simple things: the price of fish, the weather, a repair needed on the roof. Haruna barely heard herself. Mr. Yamamoto was in front of her not as an employer, but as a man. During the meal, he lifted a hand to his shoulder and rotated it with a grimace. Does it hurt? Haruna asked. I've been writing too much. This shoulder has gone stiff. You could see a masseur. I don't have time. The words left Haruna's mouth before she could stop them. I could ease it a little if you'd like. Silence dropped between them. Mr. Yamamoto looked surprised, and Haruna felt her face burn. Forgive me. I shouldn't have offered. It's just, my late husband used to have shoulder pain, and I would help him. Mr. Yamamoto hesitated, then nodded. If it's not a trouble, I'd appreciate it. After she washed the dishes, Haruna went to the sitting room. Mr. Yamamoto sat with his back to her, and she stood behind him, hands trembling. I'll begin, sir. When she set her fingers on his shoulders, she felt the hardness of muscle beneath the fabric. Yes, he was old, but full of strength, without the fragility one would expect at 66. Haruna pressed carefully, and Mr. Yamamoto exhaled slowly. You have good hands, Haruna. Warm hands. The words went straight through her. She continued, first on the shoulders, then the upper back. Each breath he took seemed deeper, and each silence between them said more than any spoken sentence. Then the front door. I'm back. Aiko's voice came from the entryway. Haruna pulled her hands away, as if burned, and Mr. Yamamoto rose too quickly. What's going on? Aiko asked, as she entered. Nothing, he answered too fast. Haruna was helping my shoulder. It's very stiff. Aiko looked at Haruna without suspicion. I see. Thank you, Haruna. My husband always neglects himself. Aiko didn't seem to notice anything, but Haruna felt her heart pounding. That night, in her own room, she couldn't stop staring at her hands. They still remembered the shape of his shoulders. After that day, something changed in Mr. Yamamoto as well. For a week, they treated each other with excessive formality. If they met in the corridor, they looked away. If they spoke, it was only about necessary matters. But the silence between them wasn't empty. It was loaded, like a taut rope that could snap at any moment. One morning, as Haruna served tea, Mr. Yamamoto said, The massage the other day helped me a great deal. I'm glad, sir. If you ever have time, perhaps you could help me again. Haruna lowered her eyes. Whenever you need it. From then on, Wednesdays became different. When Aiko left for dance practice, Haruna felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Mr. Yamamoto didn't always call for her, but when he did, she came with her pulse racing. At first it was only massages, then conversations, then longer silences. One afternoon, passing each other in a narrow corridor, their bodies brushed lightly. He apologized. She said it was nothing, but both of them knew it was something. Things became more dangerous when Madame Aiko announced a trip. Next week, I'm going to Kyoto for a relative's memorial, she said over dinner. 2 nights and 3 days. Haruna froze with her bowl in her hands. 2 nights and 3 days. Aiko went on without noticing the tremor that had just been born inside her maid. Haruna, take good care of my husband. You know, if I leave him alone, he eats whatever. Yes, Mom. Don't worry. Her voice sounded weaker than she meant it to. That night, Haruna didn't sleep. She imagined the empty house, Mr. Yamamoto, the silence, the danger. And she admitted, ashamed, that part of her was waiting for something to happen. Friday arrived. Haruna chose a kimono more elegant than usual. Not too loud, but beautiful enough that she could feel it on herself. When she arrived at the mansion, Mr. Yamamoto looked at her a moment longer than normal. "You look different today, Haruna." She lowered her head. "Different? That color suits you." No one had said something like that to her in years. Late morning, Madame Aiko left for Kyoto. "I'll be back Sunday at dusk." "Have a safe journey, Mom." When the door slid shut, the house seemed to hold its breath. Haruna prepared lunch with more care than ever, and when Mr. Yamamoto emerged from the study and saw the table, he smiled. "Haruna, this looks like a feast. I didn't want you to eat poorly while your wife is away. Then sit with me. I won't let you prepare all this just to watch me eat." They ate together. At first they spoke little. Then Mr. Yamamoto set his chopsticks down and said with a sincerity that made the air tremble, "Haruna, in these 8 years, you've done so much for this house. I only did my job. No, you did more than that. You made this place livable, comfortable, warm." Haruna felt a knot rise in her throat. "You and Madam gave me a place when I had none. You were never just a servant to us." The word "us" pulled her back to reality. Madam Aiko existed. Her trust existed. Guilt existed. And yet Haruna didn't stand up. After lunch, she washed the dishes. Mr. Yamamoto prepared tea and invited her to sit. This time Haruna sat closer than before. Perhaps by accident, perhaps not. In the silence, the brush of their sleeves on the tatami felt too loud. "Haruna," he said suddenly. "Yes, sir." "Lately, I think about you a great deal." She didn't answer. She couldn't. "I know I shouldn't say it," he continued. "I know who I am, who you are, and what we must keep. But since the day you helped my shoulder, something changed in me. I find myself waiting for your footsteps in the hallway. I find myself listening for your voice from the kitchen. That isn't right." Haruna closed her eyes. "Me too." Mr. Yamamoto looked at her. "You too? I think about you as well, and I know it isn't right." The silence that followed was long. Then he took her hand, not forcefully, but with a gentleness that made her tremble more than any hunger ever could. "Haruna, we can still stop." She knew it was true. They could still rise, separate, and return to their places, but they didn't. "Mr." Yamamoto lifted his hand slowly toward her face. "Tell me to stop." Haruna didn't. He kissed her carefully. It wasn't a reckless kiss. It was restrained, almost sad, as if they both knew they were opening a door they would never fully close again. For Haruna, that kiss felt like breathing again after years underwater. 8 years without a man's warmth. 8 years without being looked at. 8 years telling herself she didn't need anything. And suddenly, there it was. Her body remembering what her mind had buried. That night they crossed the line. There were no grand promises, no words that could cleanse what they were doing. Only 2 older people, wounded by loneliness, searching in each other for proof that they were still alive. Mr. Yamamoto was careful, and Haruna sensed in him a mix of experience, tenderness, and strength, so vivid that she understood, in a private and painful way, what Madame Aiko had confessed. That man still carried an energy that didn't match his age. But for Haruna, it wasn't a burden. It was a revelation. Not because it was right, because it made her feel like a woman again. Later, lying in silence, Mr. Yamamoto asked her, "Do you regret it?" Haruna looked at the moonlight filtering through the paper door. "I don't know. Part of me knows this is wrong. Another part feels like I've come back to life." He rested his forehead against hers. "I feel the same." They slept little. Guilt lay between them, even if neither spoke its name. Saturday morning, Haruna woke before him. Watching him sleep, she thought he looked younger. Not in the face, where time had left its marks, but in the peace of his expression. She dressed quietly and went to the kitchen. As she prepared soup, she felt a strange calm, almost dangerous, like life had stopped punishing her for a few hours. Mr. Yamamoto came into the kitchen, hair undone, wearing a softness she had never seen on him. "Haruna, I should have helped you." "No, sir. Oh. This is my work." He stepped closer. "Today, I don't want you to be only my maid." She looked at him. "Then, what do you want me to be?" "Haruna. Just Haruna." The words nearly made her cry. For years she had been the widow, the servant, the woman who didn't take up space, the one who arrived early, cleaned, cooked, and left in silence. That day, someone spoke her name as if it were enough. They prepared breakfast together. Mr. Yamamoto cut fruit clumsily, and Haruna laughed for the first time in a long time. "Sir, if you cut like that, you'll slice your finger. Then you'll have to take care of me." "I already do that every day." They looked at each other, and both fell quiet. Saturday passed like an illusion. They drank tea, spoke about their lives, and let the hours drift without watching the water clock too closely. Haruna spoke of Hiroshi, of the loneliness after his death, of the years she believed her heart had dried up. Mr. Yamamoto spoke of his marriage with a calm bitterness. "Aiko and I have been a couple in name only for a long time," he confessed. "I don't hate her, I respect her, but our hearts separated years ago. We live under the same roof, keep appearances, and do what's expected of us. But many nights, I've felt lonelier with her on the other side of the house than I would in a place completely empty." Haruna listened sadly. "Even so, she is your wife." "I know." "And I owe her so much." "I know that too." That truth didn't separate them immediately. If anything, it made the time they had feel both more precious and more doomed. Sunday arrived with a shadow. Aiko would return at dusk, and from morning, Haruna felt a weight in her stomach. Every gesture tasted like farewell. She washed dishes slowly, arranged bowls, changed sheets, aired rooms, and erased any trace of the past 2 days. Mr. Yamamoto watched her in silence. "Haruna." "Yes, sir. I don't want you to think this was a whim for me." She gripped the cloth she was folding. "I don't. But I can't promise you anything clean." Haruna closed her eyes. "I know. When Aiko returns, we must act as before." "Yes." But both of them knew there was no before anymore. At the 7th hour, the front door opened and Aiko's voice rang bright. "I'm back." Haruna went to greet her. "Welcome home, Mom." Aiko looked tired but pleased. "The trip was long, but the memorial went well. I saw relatives I haven't seen in years." "Haruna, did my husband eat well?" "Yes, Mom. I looked after him as you asked." The words fell on Haruna like a stone. "I looked after him as you asked. True, and also a terrible lie." "Thank you," Aiko said. "I knew I could trust you." Haruna had to bow to hide her eyes. That night, in her room, she didn't cry. She only lay awake staring into the darkness, the happiness of those 2 days mixed with a guilt that stole her breath. Even so, the relationship did not end immediately. For the next 2 weeks, Wednesdays became the only space where Haruna and Mr. Yamamoto could be alone. These were no longer innocent meetings, and they couldn't pretend it was all casual. But fear kept growing. Haruna began to listen for the door, even when no one arrived. She checked the water clock again and again. She startled at the creak of wood. She smelled perfume on her own clothing like proof of a crime. Mr. Yamamoto changed too. Before, he had seemed sure of himself. Now, sometimes, after being with her, he would stare into nothing. "I'm hurting you," he said, one afternoon. "No." "Yes, I see it in your face." Haruna wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. "It hurts to look at Madame Aiko." He lowered his head. "It hurts me too." The danger became undeniable when Aiko returned early from practice. Haruna and Mr. Yamamoto barely had time to compose themselves. Haruna slid open windows to let air move through while he pretended to review documents. Aiko entered the sitting room and looked around. "Why are all the windows open? It's cold." Haruna felt her hands turn to ice. "There was a heavy smell, Mom. I thought it would be better to air the room." Aiko watched her carefully. "A heavy smell? I smell perfume." "It's mine. I bought some at the market. Perhaps I used too much." "Yes," Aiko said slowly. "Perhaps?" She said nothing more, but from that day her eyes changed. She began to watch. One morning she called Haruna into the sitting room. "You've been different lately." "Different, Mom?" "There's more color in your face. You walk differently. And my husband has changed too. He used to spend the whole day shut in his study. Now he seems livelier." Haruna felt her throat tighten. "Perhaps the weather has agreed with him." "Perhaps." Aiko smiled, but not sweetly. It was a smile full of questions. Days later, while sorting laundry, Aiko spoke again. "Haruna, have you noticed my husband changes his underclothes more often?" Haruna nearly dropped the garment in her hands. "I couldn't say, Mom." "It's strange. He hasn't been practicing with the sword or working in the warehouse. And yet, there's more laundry, and I've noticed your perfume in his study. Do you clean it more often than usual?" "Only when it needs it." "I see." That night Haruna spoke with Mr. Yamamoto. "Madam suspects." He went pale. "What did she say?" Haruna told him everything. Mr. Yamamoto fell silent for a long time, then said what they both knew was inevitable. "We have to stop." Haruna felt immediate pain, though she knew it was right. "Yes. If we continue, we will destroy her. And I will destroy you too." "I know." He took Haruna's hands. "Forgive me. Don't say that. I chose this too." "Even so, I should have been stronger." "We both should have been." They decided to see each other one last time. It was a Wednesday. Madame Aiko left as usual, and the moment the door shut, Haruna and Mr. Yamamoto stood facing one another without moving. There was no lightness in the air, only sadness. "Today will be the last time," he said. "Yes." They moved slowly toward each other. That final meeting didn't have the forbidden sparkle of the first days. It carried the weight of a farewell. It was a desperate attempt to store in memory something they knew had to die. Afterward, they held each other in silence. "Haruna," he whispered, "thank you for making me feel alive again." Haruna closed her eyes. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost too. But it wasn't ours to take." He nodded. "From today on, we return to our places. You will be my master. I will be your maid. Can you do that?" Haruna took a long moment. "I don't know. But I must." From that day on, they separated. Not physically, because they still lived under the same roof during work hours, but in everything else. If they passed in the corridor, they bowed. If they spoke, it was about food, accounts, cleaning, visitors. Wednesdays stopped being special. Haruna stayed in the kitchen or went to the market. Mr. Yamamoto remained in his study. Little by little, Aiko seemed to relax. "The house feels calmer lately," she said one afternoon. Haruna managed a small smile. "I'm glad, Mom." But inside there was no calm. In the first month, every corner hurt. The sitting room where they drank tea, the study where they talked, the narrow corridor, the kitchen on Saturday morning. Everything remembered. In the second month, the pain dulled. In the third, Haruna could look at Mr. Yamamoto without her heart racing. At least, that's what she told herself. One morning, serving breakfast, he said, "Haruna, the soup is excellent." Before, such words would have made her tremble. Now she simply bowed. "Thank you, sir." Aiko looked at Haruna warmly. "You seem calmer lately." "Before, you looked like you were carrying something very heavy." Haruna felt guilt split open again. "Perhaps I was tired." "You must take care of yourself. This house depends greatly on you." The words nearly broke her. This house depends on you. And she had betrayed that trust. From then on, Haruna decided to atone in silence. She arrived half an hour earlier, cleaned more carefully, prepared meals with more dedication, and attended to Aiko with patience that almost hurt. "Haruna, you work too much," Aiko told her one day. "You'll fall ill." "I'm fine, ma'am. You don't have to push yourself so hard. You're already valuable to us." Haruna lowered her eyes. "Even so, I want to." She couldn't confess. She couldn't ask forgiveness. All she could do was serve better. One Friday at dusk, Mr. Yamamoto called her into his study. It was the first time in months they spoke alone. Haruna felt fear, but she entered. "Sit," he said. She sat far from him. Mr. Yamamoto looked at her with sadness. "Aiko is worried about you. I am too." "There's no reason." "There is. You're trying to punish yourself." Haruna didn't answer. "What happened was both our responsibility," he continued. "Don't carry it all alone." Haruna clenched her hands. "You had a wife. I owed her gratitude. We both failed, but I also sought that closeness. I wasn't dragged into it. I walked toward it." Mr. Yamamoto closed his eyes. "I don't want you to destroy yourself over this." "I'm not destroying myself. I'm only trying to become worthy of my place again." "You already are worthy." Haruna shook her head gently. "Not as before." He didn't argue. They both understood some wounds could not be closed by words. That night, Haruna wrote in an old notebook she kept beneath her futon, "Today, I accept that it was love, but a mistaken love. That doesn't mean it wasn't real. And because it was real, it doesn't mean it wasn't a sin." She cried as she wrote, not only from guilt, also from farewell. More months passed, and life regained its shape. To anyone watching, Haruna became again the discreet maid she'd always been. She made breakfast, cleaned, washed, went to market, served dinner, and returned to her room at night. Mr. Yamamoto became Mr. Yamamoto again, respected, serious, a little distant. Aiko trusted without reserve again, and that was what hurt most. One day, as Haruna served tea, Aiko said, "Having you come to this house was a blessing. I don't know what we would have done without you." Haruna nearly dropped the teapot. "Please don't say that, Mom." "I mean it. You're like family." "Family?" The word went through her like a blade. That night Haruna understood that some guilt doesn't vanish. You only learn to live with it without repeating the mistake. Almost a year after that confession, Haruna decided to tell her story. Not to justify herself, not to seek pity, but as a warning. Looking back, she could see every step clearly. It began with Madame Aiko's sentence, with that ashamed confession about her husband's vigor. Haruna should not have kept curiosity She should have listened with compassion and nothing more. But she had been alone for 8 years. 8 years denying her desire to be held, to be special to someone, to feel a gaze separate her from the world. Loneliness, when unacknowledged, finds crooked paths. Haruna understood it too late. The shoulder massage wasn't only kindness. She wanted to be close. The carefully chosen kimono wasn't an accident. She wanted to be seen. The carefully prepared meals during Aiko's trip weren't only service. She wanted to create a moment. And when Mr. Yamamoto took her hand, she still could have stopped, but she didn't. That was why her confession was so bitter. She couldn't say she'd been tricked or that she didn't know what she was doing. She knew and still crossed the line. Mr. Yamamoto failed too. He had a wife. And even if the marriage was cold, even if their life together was mostly appearance, even if he felt lonely, none of that gave him the right to seek comfort in the woman his wife considered almost family. But Haruna didn't want to hide behind his guilt. Her own was enough. Over the years, Haruna learned 5 truths she wanted to leave to anyone who listened. The first, age does not extinguish the heart. At 61, Haruna discovered she could still feel desire, shame, hope, jealousy, and trembling. She wasn't a girl, but she wasn't stone either. The body ages, yes, but the soul still wants warmth. That isn't shameful. What's shameful is using that desire to hurt others. The second, a small choice can open a great fall. A glance that lingers too long, an excuse to stand closer, a garment chosen with intention, a conversation that shouldn't happen, a secret shared. Nothing seems serious at first, but great mistakes rarely begin with great acts. They begin with small permissions. The third, loneliness becomes dangerous when you pretend it doesn't exist. For 8 years, Haruna told herself she was fine, that she didn't need love, didn't need companionship, that her life could shrink to work, silence, and habit. But loneliness doesn't disappear because you deny it. It accumulates in invisible corners of the soul. It hides behind routine, and when it finds a crack, it pours out with a force that can drag everything down. If Haruna had acknowledged that emptiness earlier, perhaps she would have sought comfort in healthier places. Friendship, a temple, an activity, a sincere conversation with someone trustworthy. But she didn't. Instead, she clung to the nearest, most dangerous comfort. The man living under the same roof where she served. The fourth, regret cannot change the past, but it can change the road you take afterward. Haruna couldn't undo what happened, erase the lie, or restore the trust she betrayed. But she could stop. She could step back, return to her place, and decide that from that moment on, she would live with more honesty. It wasn't a perfect atonement. Aiko never learned the full truth, but Haruna understood that even after falling, a person can still stand and walk in the right direction. The fifth, and perhaps the most painful, feeling alive does not always mean you are doing what's right. In those 2 days with Mr. Yamamoto, Haruna felt something awaken inside her after years of silence. She felt warmth, tenderness, emotion, and a happiness she believed she'd lost forever. But woven through all of that was betrayal, because while she regained a part of herself, she was harming a sacred trust. The human heart is complex. Sometimes it finds light in the wrong place, calls love what also contains selfishness, and confuses relief for destiny. That's why maturity isn't about never feeling again. It's about learning what to do with what you feel. Today, Haruna still works in the Yamamoto house. Every morning she rises before dawn, combs her hair carefully, ties her obi, and walks through Edo's streets as merchants open their stalls and cooking smoke lifts toward the pale sky. When she arrives at the mansion, she bows respectfully, lights the fire, washes the rice, and makes soup as she has for years. When she sees Mr. Yamamoto, she bows and greets him with the same calm as always. "Good morning, sir." He answers in the same way. "Good morning, Haruna." Sometimes their eyes meet for only an instant. No one else could understand what hides in that silence. Gratitude, guilt, farewell, and a mute promise never to cross the same line again. Then each continues as if nothing happened. With Madame Aiko, the pain is different. When Aiko moves through the house with the quiet elegance of a former dancer and smiles at Haruna with trust, Haruna feels a sting in her chest. "Haruna, the tea is delicious today." "I'm glad, Mom." Simple, everyday words, yet to Haruna they weigh more than any scolding. Each kind gesture from Aiko reminds her how much she received from that house and how much she nearly destroyed. Even so, she accepts that pain because she understands it's part of the price of remembering who she wants to be. Haruna doesn't tell this story to be forgiven. She tells it because somewhere there may be another person like her. A widow, a wife, an older man, an older woman who believes they no longer need love. Someone who feels invisible. Someone stirred by a gaze that doesn't belong to them. To that person, Haruna would say, "Don't deny your loneliness. Don't mock your own heart. And don't believe age makes you immune to error. We remain human until the last day. And that's exactly why we must guard ourselves more carefully. An emotion can be natural and still lead us to a wrong act." Wanting to be loved does not give us the right to break another person's trust. Some wounds do not bleed, but they last for years. And even if you have made a mistake, you can still choose not to sink deeper. Haruna is 61. Mr. Yamamoto is 66. Madame Aiko still walks through the house with the quiet elegance she never lost. The three share the same roof during the day, bound by a story only two know, and by a trust the third still gives without knowing. That may be the most painful part of all. There was no public punishment, no scandal, no shouting, no expulsion. Haruna's punishment was far quieter. To remember. To remember every time she washes a cup, every time she folds a kimono, every time Madame Aiko thanks her, and every time Mr. Yamamoto avoids looking at her for too long. To remember she was loved for an instant, yes, but also that love did not belong to her. At the end of her confession, Haruna wrote words that held everything she had learned. "I thought, at my age I could no longer lose my judgment. I was wrong. I thought loneliness was a quiet thing. I was wrong. I thought feeling alive was enough to justify my steps. I was wrong. Now, I can only live in a way that makes my regret not useless." Perhaps that is the most human lesson of all. We are not perfect at 20 or 40 or 60. Age does not make saints of us. It only gives us more memories, more wounds, and, if we are humble, a little more awareness. Haruna fell, but she also learned how to stop. And though she could never be the same again, she chose to become someone more honest than before. That is why she still rises each morning, prepares the soup, cleans the corridors, and treats Madame Aiko with deeper respect than ever. When she looks at her reflection in the basin water, she no longer sees only a widow, or a servant, or a guilty woman. She sees a person still learning, at life's twilight, after an era, after crossing a line she never should have crossed. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and leave a like. In the streets of Old Edo, thousands of lives like Haruna's were hidden, silent lives marked by desire, guilt, secrets, and lessons that arrived too late. Tell me in the comments what you think of this confession. Do you believe loneliness can push a good person into a serious mistake? Do you think Haruna did right to end the relationship, even without ever confessing the truth? Has a late-blooming emotion ever tested everything you thought you knew about yourself? Share this story with someone who might need it. Perhaps right now, somewhere, someone is fighting a similar temptation, convinced no one would understand their shame. Maybe hearing Haruna's story will help them stop before crossing their own line. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next deep Edo story, where even in old age, even in silence, behind a paper door, the human heart still reveals its secrets.